we said it's okay to record. I have just started recording, and I think this is a good time to start.
Okay.
I'd like to welcome all our ITS Michigan members and friends. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar presented jointly by Gary and Jordan. Before we start, I just wanted to kindly remind all our guests to kindly mute yourselves as you come in. We're all in different places, and it's sometimes easy to forget doing so, and then there are some noises in the background. We've all been there. I'm guilty of that as well. So a shortcut for muting yourself in Zoom is Alt-A, or you can just simply click on the microphone and you see the red slash going through it. The other thing I wanted to mention was this presentation, this webinar will be recorded. Feel free to type in your questions and your comments in the chat box. There's a chat icon in the bottom that you can click on and type in your questions. I'd like to open it up just real quickly to Gary and Jordan just to ask them, would you guys rather have questions at the end or during the presentation if they come up?
We pretty much like to keep it open, Tony, as long as we're mindful of time so we can get everything in. I think it's great. If someone has a question, please throw it in the chat box. Jordan and I both will be monitoring that. David Hood will be as well. So we'll keep an eye on it.
Excellent. So why don't we do that? So essentially, if you have any questions during the presentation, kindly type them up in the chat box, and we'll open it up at the end of the presentation for everyone to be able to chime in, with questions directly. There will be a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. I also wanted to kind of plug in real quickly, just because of my social media side. Please, if you haven't yet looked up ITS Michigan, look us up on Twitter and LinkedIn. It's always good to kind of just be in touch through social media with the organizations that you guys are following. So with that, I'd like to start introducing the session and then introducing our guests. So with increasing investment in smart cities and growing reliance on connected systems, our infrastructure becomes more vulnerable to physical and virtual attacks. And managing that infrastructure becomes increasingly difficult and expensive when it's being protected by an archaic mechanical solution. Vandalism is growing with civil unrest, causing costly damage and outages. Cyber attacks with denial of service and ransomware are becoming more commonplace, and a series of interruption to operations. So we are pleased today to be joined by two professionals from ASSA ABLOY and GENETEC to discuss the trends and challenges affecting our unmanned infrastructure, best practices when managing and protecting our roadside enclosures, and how to optimize our operations and manage real-time information. First, I'd like to welcome Gary Bruner. Gary works for ASSA ABLOY, which is the largest provider of door opening solutions in the world, anything related to doors anywhere. So Gary has been in the commercial industrial security industry for over 35 years. He joined ASSA ABLOY in 2014 to manage their integrated solution business in the Southeast in Indiana. And in 2017, Gary worked with partners AXIS and GENETEC to develop ASSA ABLOY's ITS unmanned infrastructure solutions, and has since been leading ASSA's efforts in those markets. I would also like to welcome Jordan Burnstead. Did I pronounce that right, Jordan?
Yeah, you did. Thank you. Perfect.
Great, thank you. So Jordan works at GENETEC, and GENETEC, they do the software side for security and access control. Jordan is a pathfinder at GENETEC, working primarily with identity, credential, and access management solutions. Morgan leads GENETEC's efforts in the ITS and unmanned infrastructure markets, working closely with ASSA ABLOY. He has been in the security industry for more than 12 years. I'd like to welcome you both, and whenever you're ready, please feel free to click on the share screen and start the presentation.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tony. Jordan, I believe you're going to share your screen and get our presentation up.
Yes, sir. Loading it up now.
There you go.
So while you're doing that, I just want to say one more thing. I would really like to thank Jeff and Belinda for helping me get this all together here today. They actually put everything together. I'm just filling in for Jeff. So that's all I had to say. Back to you guys.
Well, thanks, Tony, and the ITS Michigan team, and welcome everybody to this presentation this afternoon. My name is Gary Bruner, as Tony mentioned. I'm joined by my partner, Jordan Burnson of GENETEC. And we're going to take you through a brief presentation that talks about what you're seeing on the screen now, our unified solutions for unmanned infrastructure, which in your particular case really means traffic, and the traffic cabinets that are on your infrastructure. But we'll take you through this brief presentation, talk about the technology, really get you starting to think about that and why you would want to do something like this. And then at the end of the presentation, we're going to show you a live demo. Jordan has an actual traffic cabinet there in his office, and we'll take you through and show you some stuff with his mobile camera. So with that, I'll get started. Jordan, if you can tee us off there. Excuse me. One of the things that we think of when we think about emerging trends, and then in particular for us within the transit infrastructure, like a lot of other things in our industry today with technology, we've seen an exponential growth in the Internet of Things. I know we hear this a lot and it seems to be maybe overused to an extent, but if you think about 20, 25, 30 years ago, maybe not even as long ago, a lot of the traffic intelligence, a lot of the security and access control intelligence was more relay based and connected to a PLC logic controller. Now, everything that you see out there today in those traffic cabinets is on the network. So that's a real concern from a security perspective, making sure that those devices on the network are secure. And then when you would talk about that, there's also a reliance on multiple service and maintenance providers. You're doing work internally with your internal technicians and engineers, but you're also outsourcing a lot of that work through contractors to service and support the systems that you have. And then for us, a lot of us, and especially you guys in the traffic industry, we're seeing an increased involvement in the regulatory agencies. Jordan and I have seen that every step of the way. The more we do, the more we get involved, the more technology progresses, the more the security aspect of it from that standpoint, the more we see the overwatch from the regulatory agencies, and that's only going to grow. So what are the challenges that we're facing with managing an unmanned infrastructure? Well, the first thing, you guys know it all too well, is analog operations in a digital world. What does that mean? Well, we're essentially using a key and a lock that was designed back in the 1970s and still is based on a 1970 standard. And for those manufacturers of traffic cabinets today, those cabinets are still shipping out of a manufacturing facility with that mechanical lock and key in them. So you see that as a standard. And what you're doing is you're taking that key and handing that key out to an evolving workforce where you've got contractors, subcontractors, your internal technicians and engineers, very diverse workforce that's been assigned a key that has access to everything within your infrastructure. And what does that mean? Well, it means there's a lack of control. When I hand out that key to a technician or engineer, whether it's internal or a subcontractor, I'm giving them access to my infrastructure and I have no control over where that key goes, who uses that key, what that key has access to, when and where it was used. And when we look at that, that's actually part of that cybersecurity threat that we see out there. We all know that with the IoT expansion we talked about and how the technology inside of a cabinet is network controlled. Now we have a workforce that has a key that you can't control, that has access to a cabinet that touches your network. Very, very much of a concern. Next, Jordan. So what do you have at the edge? And we consider this the edge, and Jordan's going to explain this a little further. But what you have in one of the typical traffic cabinets out there, in our experience over the last 2.5 to 3 years, you obviously have network access. You've got a traffic controller, some conflict monitors. You may have surveillance equipment, vehicle infrastructure equipment. You probably have private data passing through that same cabinet because of the network connections. And that all that technology combined plus the cabinet, you may be $30,000 to $100,000 in value of the technology that's at that cabinet. And when you consider that, you're protecting it with a key and a lock that can be obtained on the internet, on eBay for $5 for that key. That's a huge concern, and that's how we're looking to address this market.
And kind of taken from what Gary's talking about when we're looking at just simply the edge, right? The edge is this cabinet, and as we discuss this, we look at the way that we take practices when we're securing our data and we're securing our data infrastructure. I would assume in many cases, I know I've actually been in some of the facilities there in the city of Detroit in their operations centers for the city. All these facilities are very secure. There's access control for us to get in the building. There's visitor management that we're required to clear through. All the server rooms and the data closets are secure. All of these things are locked down and protected. But then in that same breath, we then take a 1 gig or 10 gig fiber link and run it out to a cabinet that's sitting in an alley or on an intersection, and we secure it with a $5 key. So we've taken this incredibly secure platform and we built tunnels to it, and we left it completely open. So we built a castle, but forgot we built a bunch of tunnels out that have nothing but a door blocking the way. So the way for people to get in has become very easy. And this is what we're trying to draw that attention to, if you will, as we start to move forward. And what our goal is really to bring some visibility and control into those operations. And I do want to, before I continue, I'm going to break the normal pitch here for a second. And Tony, you had mentioned the denial of service attacks and the ransomware attacks that are becoming more prevalent. We just actually finished up a talk with some of our cybersecurity team, as GENETEC spends, as a software company, a ton of time focusing on this. And we just got a report that ransomware and denial of service attacks are up 400% since the beginning of COVID. This is the new trend. You know, there's actually organized crime units that this is all they do. They're actually even outsourcing to other units that have hacking capabilities and leveraging this to get these denial of service attacks implemented. As we see, even Texas DOT was a recent victim to a massive denial of service attack. So this is a very big point that we're trying to help here with. So as we move forward, yes, there is that security component. That's a real big piece of our puzzle here. The need to manage access rights. I'll jump one. Being able to know who has access to these components that have direct pipelines into your system is paramount. These solutions can also help with labor costs. So this isn't just about simply access control. This is a component of your field force management. Knowing where and when someone accessed a piece of your infrastructure, how long they were in there, why they were there, maybe linking this to an actual work order, and giving reasons as to why this infrastructure is being interacted with. As I mentioned earlier, managing those access rights, knowing who and where someone can access. Being able to manage this from a distance. Maybe there's certain components that you just simply don't want somebody to access without you being able to control that remotely. And we do have customers that do that now, where if you want to access a certain cabinet, maybe a hub cabinet that is crucial to the operation of your network, that one we're only going to remotely unlock. After we know you're there, we visually see you on a camera in front of the cabinet. Now we'll click the button to open up that piece of infrastructure or that building or anything like that. So knowing who and where someone's accessing and being able to manage that from a distance. Digitizing your SOPs is another thing that a lot of people haven't thought about, but how do we react when we do see a vulnerability inside of our system? Is there a process that's built that we should follow? There probably is, and it's probably in a binder behind your operator, and it's got a ½ inch of dust on top of it. Because nobody looks at those binders. How do we put that digitally in front of the operators? You see a damaged cabinet or you see a forced entry into a location. How do we react and how do we move forward? Those are things that we try to do with our software to help our customers see that through that real-time information, giving them that and linking that to their video that we've started to leverage for multiple tools out there in the field. So being able to start to tie all of these components together and gain operational insights. So knowing this technician is in this location working on this cabinet, or this engineer or this group is going to be working on this piece of my infrastructure for this amount of time, and taking all of this information and creating real audit trails. So knowing exactly where people have moved, where they're interacting with, and what is the trends inside our system, where are we having to work on more often, where are we having to interact with more frequently to see where things go.
So with that, what are we looking at from a cabinet perspective? What are we talking about from a technology, security technology component? And if you look at this diagram, there are two images on the right there. And what we've done is broken this down, and we'll show you more when we get to the live demonstration part of this. But we essentially have a couple of different versions of this. One being the plus version, which is an offline but upgradable solution. And then the one on the right being our enterprise solution that's fully online, fully real time, and fully connected online to an access control system that's provided by GENETEC. So what does this give you? Well, there's advanced reporting and audit trails that you don't have at all with your mechanical key today. There's integration with third-party directories and software. If you've got your traffic management software, if you've got your contractor management or order entry or work order solution software, there's some integration capabilities with that. It also provides you that real-time information back from the lock in the cabinet, so that I can not only see that, say, Jordan used his card to access a cabinet, but I could also reach out from the software and actually control that cabinet lock and unlock it if I needed to let someone into a cabinet that did not have a credential at the time. So it gives you that real-time capability and interaction with the cabinet. It also provides both real-time and forensic video verification, such that if someone accessed the cabinet, if you've got cameras at a nearby intersection that are either looking at the cabinet or can be positioned to look at the cabinet, then I can say on a card read, or when that door is opened, I can have that camera swing around, take a snapshot of who's entering the cabinet, then go back to what it was doing. And that can all be recorded for history. So there's interaction between the two. On our side, the Medico XT integration, that is our intelligent key, our digital key, so to speak. That is integrated into the software so that we can not only have online access control, we have override capabilities in the event of power failure at the cabinet. You always have access to the cabinet, but it's always authorized access, not anyone access. One of the important things about this that you guys, especially up in Michigan, need to know is that our technology, the controller, the card reader, the lock, that entire solution has been through NEMA TS2 testing with Texas DOT at their Austin lab, and we passed that TS2 rating and that testing. So we are certified under that to be able to use in harsh weather conditions, which you guys certainly have up in Michigan. And one of the things that, again, that's important from the plus to the enterprise solution is it's an upgrade path. So that if you decide, I just want to use an offline electronic solution that uses an intelligent key today, but down the road, I might want to upgrade that to a fully online solution, you have the capability of doing that. So we provide you that migration path from one level to the next. Next, Jordan.
Yeah, so what Gary's talking about there is there's a lot of different options as we've approached it, because we found that, of course, one size does not fit all. And so we've tried to create a family of products, if you will, that can address the customer's needs as they move forward. Again, this is the hardware components that support that greater management that you're going to ultimately gain through the software that's generating all this data for you. So how do we generate data? We have to put something there that's going to collect it. Now, while we're collecting that data, controlling access is going to be a really key point, because we want to protect that core system that you guys have out in that field, and that's obviously growing. So as Gary talked about, there's the enterprise solution that we see here on the top end. That enterprise solution is what's out there to really provide the customer with maximum control over their system. And we'll show you that here on my cabinet that I have set up in just a minute. But this is a fully online solution, real-time information, real-time auditing, real-time control, and remote capability. We do have customers that have cabinets that aren't connected to the network yet, or maybe they want to do a phased rollout of this. So this gives them, that's why we created the Plus, was to give them the ability to deploy a solution originally using the physical key, the physical intelligent key that we'll show you in a second, but that's still using that powered lock that later we could upgrade, add the components, and make it a fully online solution. And finally, definitely not least, but it does give a customer other options, is the Medico solution where you can actually mount a lock, and we'll show you that one as well. It still uses an intelligent key where we'll have access control profiles and rules loaded into an intelligent key. So I can't just access this at any time. I'm still collecting data on that key, and when it comes back to us, we can download that information and generate reports on access events and things of that nature. And so we have multiple options when it comes to the need to deploy out into the field and give a customer abilities to move forward as they go forward. Our ultimate goal here, though, is simply to just bring intelligence to your fingertips. That means being able to run those reports, being able to see in real time what's going on with my system. And we wanted to show you what that looked like. So here's a few screenshots actually from the city of Atlanta. If you guys, any of you are familiar, right here's around the Centennial Olympic Park. This is where we had the Olympics back in 1996. This is also very close to where the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium is, where we recently had the Super Bowl in 2017. And this was a challenge for the city of Atlanta as they needed to secure these cabinets very quickly. Department of Homeland Security came in and said, hey, we're going to weld all your cabinets shut. We just don't want anybody to be able to hide a pipe bomb in a cabinet. So we're just going to weld a big L bracket over every door. And when we're done, you can cut it off. Well, the city of Atlanta, of course, said, you know, this is insane. We're not going to let you weld our cabinets shut 3 or 4 weeks prior to an event. What if we have to work on them? Their answer was, we'll cut it open with an FBI agent standing beside you. So we helped create, this is ultimately the first deployment, and we helped create this solution in partnership between these groups. But now the city of Atlanta can, in real time, look on a map and see, are all my cabinets secure? Are they kept locked down? And in the same way, they can click on that cabinet and see nearby cameras that are available for them to actually visually check that cabinet as well. So just before the Super Bowl, about 5 days before the Super Bowl, they removed everybody's access rights. And if you needed to work on a cabinet, you got in front of the cabinet, made a call to the TMC, and then the TMC would simply click on that cabinet, see the camera, see the operator, and then remotely unlock that cabinet. And then the law enforcement agency could actually oversee that operator or multiple operators via cameras rather than having to deploy agents out into the field. This has also, though, now started to give us the ability to generate reports for them. So this is, we're obviously not having a Super Bowl anymore. So how do we continue to use this? Every technician is using these cards to get in and out of spaces now. So now not only are we protecting that infrastructure, but we're also generating data that's valuable. So being able to run a simple report and see which cabinets are we accessing more often. The city in particular doesn't have a work order system that looks for trends yet. So being able to run a quick report and say, all right, well, these 3 cabinets, our 3 locations are getting access significantly more than anywhere else. Let's take a look at our work orders, see what's going on here. And they're finding, okay, we're out here for power issues every single day. We're out here for grounding issues. So it's simple repairs that they can make and then ultimately reduce the number of work orders that have to be cut on that location. Or maybe we think somebody's out there abusing their credentials, or somebody's just attempting to access things they shouldn't. A simple report can show us who's using their credentials more than somebody else, and then identify those that might be abusing the system. This is all about data. Yes, we're controlling and we're protecting your system, but we start to give you additional ways to manage it and control it and actually track who is in and out of different locations.
So to do just a brief summary of what we've just talked about before we get into the live demo, this is really what kind of the summation of all of that Jordan and I just went through. The first thing we're talking about is identification. We've identified the key holders and card holders that have access to your infrastructure. So now we are controlling who has access and when, whether it's a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday or 24/7 or no access until I deem it necessary that they have access. So you've identified the appropriate people that have access to your network. At the same time, we're adding a level of security to your assets in the field, and those assets being the traffic cabinet that has the technology in it. The first cabinet I opened on North Avenue, downtown Atlanta, I was really surprised that it had a Cisco switch in it. That's not surprising, but on the Cisco switch, it had the IP address, the subnet mask, and the gateway on a label right on side of that Cisco switch. So when we talk about adding that level of that first physical layer of cybersecurity protection, we're not allowing inappropriate people access to that cabinet so they can see that information that's on a Cisco switch that's an open invitation to hack your network. So we're making sure that we're adding that level of security and maintenance and control of your asset. Then, as Jordan just went through, we're providing you insights back into what's going on with your infrastructure. You know, which cabinets are being used, which people are using those the most, were they there or not? You know, if we're talking about using mechanical keys, we have no idea if a technician was there or not, or if he handed the key to someone else. Now we're looking at the ability to say, with a card and a key and a camera, we can fully identify someone that's at that particular cabinet and provide that information back to you. And then the last thing really is contractor management. And this is a big issue that when we talk about allowing contractors, external contractors, access to your infrastructure, we want to make sure that we're not just handing them a mechanical key that's go wherever you want to, whenever you want to. We want to control who has access and when they have access. And if they provide a report back to you that they worked in that cabinet for 80 hours last week, and you go back and query the system and see that they were there for only 40 hours a week, then that way you can see this almost as a return on investment and being able to tighten up how your contractors bill you based on the actual work they've done inside a cabinet. So that provides you another level of contractor management that you don't have today. So with that, that's kind of the summary. I think, Jordan, we're going to move into our live demo, but we'll pause here. If anybody has any questions they want to throw out while Jordan flips over to live, we can certainly address those.
That's an excellent leadway into what I was about to say. Thank you very much, Gary, for reading my mind. I was just going to ask if it's okay for us to take some of our audience's questions. I do see 3 of them here. Is that okay if I read them out?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the first one's from John Abraham. Can any camera system be integrated to get this function? Automatic panning to the cabinet. We have Kohu Sidewinder cameras and around 300 and ONSI for camera control.
Jordan, that's a good question for you, buddy.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the GENETEC platform is a unified platform that supports the video as well as the access control. You having ONSSI right now as an open platform video surveillance system. We definitely support Kohu and Sidewinder cameras. That's no problem for us. So there's a couple of ways we can do that. We can work in combination with ONSSI. So we can send triggered events to those cameras so that they turn and look at that area. The more ideal, simplistic, and probably lower cost way would be the takeover of that system. But there's a few ways that we can approach that. Absolutely. With GENETEC being the #1 largest and the #1 in integrations in the world for video surveillance, we have multiple ways for you to consume that.
Excellent. So the second of the 3 questions is the dashboard cloud-based or does it need to reside on the GENETEC server?
So that's another easy one. There's a couple of ways this can be done, actually, through the Medico or GENETEC software, depending on the solution that we do. This can be cloud-based, it can be server-based, or it actually can even be a hybrid-based. So if you said, we want it to run on our local servers, but then we would like to fail over to the cloud, that can also be something that can be done. These solutions are built to support your infrastructure and your architecture, not you have to fit our architecture. The goal is for it to accommodate whatever architecture you and your IT group has put in place and whatever security protocols you have prepared for that.
Excellent. And for the third question, it's from Tom Bruff. Thanks, Tom. This is a good question, but I think it's going to open up a little bit of discussion. How about we keep that third question until the end, so this way we can have people unmute themselves and they can kind of chime in with some answers. If that's okay, Tom, we're just going to shelve this until the end. And the question was just actually reaching back to the road agencies and trying to see how much of a problem or concern this may be in terms of accessing our work itself. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Gary and Jordan for the demonstration.
Okay, Jordan, you got your live camera up?
Great, yeah. So if you guys don't mind spotlighting the Jordan B phone camera there, and let me know once you see the actual cabinet.
All right, I just did. So the Jordan B is spotlighted.
Fantastic. So you guys should see a small traffic cabinet. I don't have a full size 332 in my office. I honestly didn't want to have to haul that down into my basement early COVID times. So this is the one we're going to be working with today. But as you can see, this is a NEMA style cabinet. This is a pole mounted version. Obviously still a similar cabinet to what some may be using. The solution you're going to see today is no different from it doesn't change depending on the size of the cabinet. There's just simply more hardware. But starting out, I imagine everybody's very familiar with this guy right here. This traditional lock that we see everywhere using the number 2 key. This is in every single cabinet and is deployed just about everywhere in the US, Canada, and actually turns out in quite a bit of South America and the Middle East. So if you have a number 2 key or you decide to buy one off of Amazon for $12, you have access to all this infrastructure. So what we've done, we're going to start with the enterprise solution. What we've done is we've created a solution that eliminates the use of that key. As you can see, our super clever no number 2 key sticker here. There's still a key override. We primarily are going to use a RFID reader to access this cabinet. But as you see, we always maintain a key override, as Gary pointed out earlier, in case we lose power or we lose some type of communication that would prevent the use of this card. There's always that key override that gives us the ability to access this, but it does give us the ability to control that override. But a normal daily operation, a technician would simply use his ID card, present it to the reader, and then we actually have the cabinet open up under its own power. So here you'll see we've replaced that traditional number 2 lock with a new powered lock. This lock mounts in the exact same position, so there's no alteration to your locking hardware or the lock position, regardless of its angle. It's 4 bolts out, 4 bolts in, and the lock is mounted. The lock now has a motor and a control board inside it. This gets cabled down to an actual controller that goes within the cabinet. This can be mounted anywhere. I've got it just mounted like this so that everybody can see it right out here in the front. This cabinet here, this box is also connected to our reader and connected to the door position switch. All of that communicates across my network back to the software. So when I present my card, it actually retracts the bolt. We monitor the position of the bolt as well as the door, so that we're able to know whether or not this cabinet is closed and locked. This is very important because we've seen when we've met with different agencies that the cabinet gets closed but partially locked, or it gets partially closed so that maybe I don't have to bring my key back out, or maybe I've got a real troublesome lock that it's every time I have to open it, it's a pain. So I'm just going to half lock it while I run to lunch. We want to know these things, right? So we want to know that somebody left our cabinet partially locked, so that can generate an alert and it can actually let us know that there's something wrong. The only alteration to the cabinet that's required in order to deploy this solution is the mounting of the reader. A common question is, does the reader light always stay on? I don't want to draw attention to that. This is very easy that you don't have to actually do that. This can be turned off. So this is very simple to eliminate that. So there's really only 2 devices added to the cabinet, the controller and the lock. These 2 things are mounted inside and the reader's on the outside. You can choose not to monitor off of the door position switch, or you can connect to that as well. Obviously, a lot of people ask me what is all the other equipment in my cabinet. This is just our entire server system that we use for other demos as well. It just was convenient to have it all in here. Not all of this is required, obviously, as you guys already have a lot of equipment in that cabinet. Now, as Gary mentioned earlier, we are always going to have that customer that says, well, I don't have network in my cabinet yet, or we don't have the money for the entire enterprise solution yet, but I do want to get there eventually. How can I do that? So we do that by deploying the actual powered lock without any type of controller. So this means I'm going to use my intelligent key to open this lock. And my intelligent key looks something like these two guys right here. These two keys, this is our heavy duty key and our standard slimline key. Both of these keys carry their own access control database on the key. They power the lock, so the lock itself does not need to be powered. And when I insert the key, I get a red or green light based on my access rights. So there I got a red light because this key doesn't have access to this lock. Here I got a green light, and should I had that a third hand, I would have been able to turn that lock. So this gives us the ability to access control on the door, create some basic reporting on that door, and then if we ever want to, add those components to fully upgrade it. And finally, there is the fully, what we call, it's not a full offline solution. This is still an access control solution, but it's not connected to any type of network. And this doesn't give you any capability of upgrade either. However, it still has significant benefits over a physical key, because we still provide access control parameters in the key. And when I insert the key, I either get access or I don't. And then based off of those access rights, I can then access my cabinet. And when that key comes back to our update system through multiple ways, we then collect that data and we track that and give the key its access rights for the next area. So there's multiple options as you move forward to be able to secure these cabinets, be it from a fully online solution, even linking this with cameras inside or outside or down the road, and also down to being able to secure a cabinet with a completely offline solution. This still gives us other capabilities as we move forward. Not only can we do that here, even on the online solution, we can combine the Medico, and we do for our override, but we even have intelligent padlocks that give us the ability to even add for gates and fences and things like that, continue to expand that access control even further out to padlocks and not just the traditional locking hardware. So I'm going to stop there and see if we had any questions that I need the camera for before I turn this off.
Yeah, one point I wanted to throw out real quick, Jordan, is that for all those technologies that you have there on your desk, you can use a combination of all of those. It doesn't have to be one or the other. We've got several agencies that have deployed the offline Medico solution in some rural areas that don't necessarily have high-tech equipment or a network connection, but in some of the more critical areas that require a little bit more attention, they go with the online solution. So you can certainly do a combination of any of those and even throw the padlocks in as well, which makes for a great solution depending on what you have.
Great.
So, Jordan, was there anything else you wanted to show us with this demonstration here?
No, I think we can open it up to further questions. If anybody wants to see anything in addition, I can definitely flip the camera back on and show them. But let's take a run at some of these questions here.
Okay, I think that's a great thing to start with. So now's the time. If you'd like to kind of see anything in particular, please do ask Jordan, considering his phone is still available. We can also still try it out in a bit. Would anyone like anything in particular from Jordan or Gary?
And feel free to just unmute yourself now and throw that out there, guys. You don't have to type it up.
Yes, this is Brandon Stackliff. I'm curious on the RFID and the securities presented behind that. Is there any kind of locking out after a certain amount of incorrect access attempts? You know, let's say somebody is trying to hack it and that way they could actually get in, or let's say somebody's using a badge and they might not have access. Would that lock out other users in the future if they try, let's say 3 times with their badge, it doesn't work? Does that lock everybody out?
So that's a great question. And that is a completely configurable component of the software. Traditionally, because of the way we approach this, if you have invalid access, we're not going to lock the system down because The technology that we're using in the reader prevents people from being able to hack this in a couple of ways. One is we're using what's called an OSDP reader. So there is a traditional style reader that it would be very easy to pull the reader off, cross a few wires, and you could then, with a very low cost device, collect that data, retransmit it, and open a cabinet. It's a very easy process. OSDP is an encrypted communication between the reader and the controller. So any attempt to brute force your way in, crossing wires, connecting additional devices to collect data is going to generate alerts in our system, and then we would lock that out. So if somebody tried to actually physically attach a secondary device. The other way to hack into a reader is called a brute force attack, and that's not providing a card, but it's actually putting another electronic transmitter right next to it and then transmitting hundreds of thousands of different card numbers all at the same time. So these readers are set up so that if they detect a brute force, and it's very easy to detect that because you'll see a bunch of card numbers coming at once, the reader just simply shuts off and cycles. And so it'll actually reset itself. And because it's done that, it's going to send an alert to our system, and we'll see that that's being attempted. So there's definitely ways that you can try to hack your way in, but we are leveraging this. And if you leverage the right credentials, these are highly secure credentials that currently have 100% success rate against any type of hacking attempts.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, I believe so. Thank you.
Good. I see another question on chat from John Abraham. And John, let me just ask you back, if you don't mind, when you talk about are the keys reprogrammable for any reason locally in your agency, meaning reassigning a key to a different person or reassigning day and time access? What do you mean necessarily by reprogrammable?
Yeah, I mean, those are kind of what I was thinking about, the two things. You know, if we have to reassign it from one contractor to another contractor, for example, or we want to cut access to somebody who has a key, that kind of thing. Can all that be done remotely in our offices? Or
yes. Yeah, you don't have to send the key back to us to do that. You would have the software to control that and assign that key to a particular person or contractor, and then unassign that and reassign it to a different person or contractor, or go change what cabinets they have access to and what day and times they have access to it. That's all controlled by you, the user, and how you program that key to work.
And if I could add to that, Gary, one thing that we've done in partnership with ASSA ABLOY is to ingest all this information and these intelligent keys so this doesn't become an additional management burden. Obviously, as we move forward, people don't want to have to deal with this every day, and they don't want to have that challenge of dealing with somebody sitting there constantly interacting with the system. So this can actually be a self-managed system. Each individual key holder can have a login to a self-service portal where they can make changes as they feel necessary. And then those change requests can then go to that area's owner. And then they can, either grant or deny those requests, and the changes are made automatically in the system. So we can build a system that becomes quite self-managed rather than something that requires somebody to learn a lot of specialized software and sit behind and manage on a daily basis. We don't want to create something and bring something to bear that's going to increase your workload. Everything that we're doing should just start generating more valuable data to your system. It should enhance the way that you deal with your field force. This should only bring more efficiency to you. It shouldn't be something that adds additional pains and frustrations, if you will.
Great. There was also a follow-up question from John. Also, are the external readers hardy enough for our Michigan weather, essentially, and the weather conditions, snow, rain, heat, and that variation between summer and winter? I added that to the end.
Yeah, so absolutely. It's, as Gary mentioned earlier, the NEMA TS2 testing that we've done actually a couple of times in individual components. We can fit these into smaller environmental chambers where we do push these at the -40 all the way up to the +70. These are where they're certified, and I realize up in Michigan, you guys see temperatures below -40, which, God help you all when you do. I don't know what that's like being a Georgia boy. But but we definitely have the capability to continue to operate in these extreme temperatures. We have put this on a cabinet. Texas DOT was nice enough to actually put it in their NEMA chamber twice, and it went through those violent fluctuations even in a short period of time, which is actually a lot more brutal on the electronics. So we did take it all the way down to negative 40 degrees. There we actually shut the equipment off, let the equipment get as cold as negative 40, then powered it up and used it in that environment. And then over a 12-hour period, took it from negative 40 all the way up to 165 degrees and did the same thing and continued to operate it. And it did survive that testing and continued to operate even when we brought it back to normal testing. And that some of that equipment is actually the same equipment that's sitting in my cabinet now. So this constantly goes through fluctuations, and it is rated for that. The reader itself is made of an extremely durable ABS plastic, and there is concern of vandalization of that reader. We've only had one reader attacked so far, as we know from all our customers, and that reader was attacked and really ultimately was damaged to the point that it didn't work, but it was because we started to see a wire was severed and we actually disconnected the communications. But somebody went after it with a cinder block and ultimately was only able to break the reader and not get into the cabinet itself.
Excellent. And just to clarify, you did mention from minus 40 to 70. I'm assuming that's Celsius, and you've done minus 40 to 160 Fahrenheit?
Correct. So we went minus 40 Fahrenheit, then Celsius, meet it in the negative at negative 40. And then in Fahrenheit, we took it to 165 degrees Fahrenheit.
Great. So I'd like to go back to Tom's question real quickly and maybe open it up to the to our attendees. So Tom was just asking earlier on, Tom Bruff, this is a question to the road agencies. How much of a problem concern is this? Have you experienced unauthorized access or other work-related issues? There was one answer from John, and I'm going to read it out, and then I'll open it up for anyone who would like to unmute themselves and chime in. John responded saying, well, it is still not a major problem, maybe because of awareness of general public and hackers. It does keep me awake at night at times, given we probably have 20 to 25 electronic devices connected to our TOC. As you may know, we recognized this about around 5 years ago, and are testing digital keys currently along with MDOT 20 to 25 devices in each cabinet. And I do echo from a city of Detroit side, the concern that we have for safety. Luckily, we have not had any physical intrusion into the boxes. We haven't had any cyber attacks as far as we know. But once we start mixing up our traffic network devices with the internet, we start worrying about potential interference and cyber attacks from other entities, which it'll be harder for us to control than the physical ones. And also during some of the protests that happened in downtown Detroit, we were worried about our cabinets. Luckily, we weren't. Our biggest problem has been people hitting our cabinets lately. But again, this is another one that's important to us. Anyone else would like to chime in?
While people are getting ready to respond, Gary and I, up until the COVID strike, we had the pleasure of traveling all over the country, in some cases internationally. And we did start to meet with certain agencies that have started to run into this issue. As you mentioned, there's not everyone has this issue right now. Not everyone's being challenged with this on a day-to-day basis, but there is areas where we're seeing this, especially the West Coast, Northwest. They're having issues with the homeless have figured out that through Amazon delivery boxes, they can get one of these keys, and that's a great source of power. Down in Texas, they did have that large denial of service attack on the Texas Transit Network. This is a suspected entry point. They haven't figured out the actual entry point to that. They had the same issue, especially in the city of Austin. They have issues with homeless using these as a primary source of power. And then unfortunately, sometimes a nice warm restroom in the winter. So these are areas where we've started to see more and more as this becomes more of a common knowledge thing. But I'd love to hear y'all's input as well.
So Again, I just want to remind our attendees, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask any questions that you may have.
It looks like Ahmad is, if I'm saying your name correctly, you've got your hand up there. Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like.
Yeah, so I'm signal systems engineer for Road Commission for Oakland County.
Mhm.
And we have not seen any, like, so to speak, vandalism to our cabinets, but if you can do something about all these cabinets getting hit, I'd greatly appreciate it. But so far, so good. But as some of you have said, and it is a concern, or at least a future concern for us, that as the complexity of these cabinets and obviously the cost of equipment that stays in these cabinets go up, it will become a concern. So your presentation is very well received. Thank you.
Well,
So
thanks
we
for that.
haven't developed a way to make these things jump out of the way yet. So you're not the first one to ask if we could find a way to get people to stop hitting them. If I could add to the question, and I imagine Gary might be about to ask the same thing.
Yeah.
Outside of just a security component of this, how often are you guys seeing yourselves wishing you had a way to look at the access report, or how often or how long a cabinet was open? A lot of agencies have brought to us, hey, we create a contract, performance contract with a certain group, and they bill us on how many hours they're out, and we maintain it during the day. In the evenings and weekends, it's handled by an agency, and we're getting bills, and we feel like we're paying for travel time, or they're just not working that long inside the cabinets. We'd love a way to be able to enforce that. Has there been any concerns, at least there, where it would be really valuable to be able to run a report and see how long your infrastructure was being accessed and when it was being accessed, so that you could possibly enforce additional billing and things of that nature?
Well, I can just speak partially for the city of Detroit, and I don't think we've had that particular issue or concern. It is a concern, though, if the cabinet is open, for example, and there's some activity that we're not aware of, but I'll leave it open for others to maybe give their experience on that.
Yeah, and I'll add in one example of something that Jordan and I saw down in Florida. It wasn't necessarily inaccurate contractor billing, but the way this particular Florida district managed the keys for their cabinets, they stored them in a hub building. And this particular technician was standing at the cabinet that he needed to service, but he didn't have the key. So he had to drive 45 minutes to a hub building, get the key, drive 45 minutes back, work on the cabinet, and then drive another 45 minutes back to the hub building to replace the key. So all that was legit. There was no problem with any of that. But you think of that time adds up to considerable use from a labor perspective, and you're getting billed for time that probably didn't need to be billed for. If you had a way to either have an intelligent key or card access to the cabinet, or remotely unlock that cabinet from the TMC, you could have avoided all of that and actually ended up saving cost. So there's just another way to look at it.
Absolutely. So we are nearing the end of our hour, and just to make sure that we're within that time, I'd like to open it up for any last questions. Does anyone have any questions for our presenters?
Hey, Tony, this is Kyle. Maybe not a question, but I wanted to just kind of bring up a little bit more of a Michigan focus, that's what most of the group is here. We've been supplying these to some various agencies. I think, as John mentioned, that Macomb's using, testing it. MDOT's got a couple that they've been evaluating. And then we've also got Kalamazoo, which is our main user, that's got about 200 of the intelligent key systems from Medico out and deployed. So it's been out there. So we've got some users that are using it on a daily basis, and they're a little more familiar. And it's something that we can, based off of some of this more information that Jordan and Gary have been able to provide, give a little bit more insight on each individual local levels if we want to in the future. Just wanted to highlight that hopefully this isn't the end of the conversation, as we know we've got a limited time and a little bit limited availability for audience, that we can kind of keep this going and keep these conversations running. Thank you.
Yeah, Marlon, you've got your hand up there.
Yes, this is Marlon Springside here, statewide. I know you tailor your systems, like you said, but can you give us a roundabout average cost and maybe a maintenance cost for your online systems a year?
Absolutely. So the online systems, I would imagine that up in Michigan, you guys use a lot of 332 style cabinets, the front and back door cabinets. That typically runs a fully online solution. It's around MSRP now. Of course, everybody knows when you go in a dealership, you see the MSRP. It's not what you're going to pay for the car. But our dealers take that and discount it. The MSRP is around $2,400 per cabinet. And that includes all the hardware and software and everything included. And then there is a yearly maintenance fee of the software that is not required. The software will continue to run forever if you want to, or if you decide you want to go with a cloud-based software, there can be a maintenance fee of anywhere between $20 to $50 per cabinet, depending on how you'd like to approach it. So if you said, hey, we would rather have everything cloud hosted, that pulls a lot of software out of the initial purchase, so that can reduce your initial purchase cost and kind of defer that into your cloud-based software as you're moving forward. So there are multiple ways to consume that. And then as you move down through the ranks, of course, you save money, you lose some features, but there's ways to consume this as you're moving forward. So we hate, some people hear that and then get distraught. To give you an example, we've done some larger deployments where they were pretty large scale deployments and ended up being sub $2,000 per cabinet, because ultimately that cost of that software was then spread across a lot more cabinets.
Great.
Ongoing costs were $20 per cabinet, I'm assuming per month or per year?
No, per year, excuse me. Not per month. If you want to pay per month, then I've got a great boat I'll take you on a fishing trip with, because that'll be amazing. But no, absolutely, it's a per year fee, not per month. And that just maintains our software. So with our software, if you're on cloud, there's obviously you're paying per year to access it, and there is no maintenance. If you buy the software up front and then you pay a small maintenance fee each year, it just keeps the software at the latest version, which includes a lot of cybersecurity tools, a lot of cloud backup of databases and things like that give you the ability to make sure that you're 100% cyber secure as well. The thing that I didn't talk about, and I regret I did not, was all the practices that we've put in place, because this is a network device, how we are giving you the ability to protect all the communications. We are very cyber secure when we approach this. Everything that we do is an obsession over how we keep your network safe. And the eventual goal of this is to actually leverage that device to give you the ability to encrypt additional communications to those cabinets. So for your dynamic message boards that don't use encrypted communication right now, or older controllers and things like that, if you'd like to actually encrypt that information, we can help with that as well.
All right. Well, thank you again to our presenters. I just wanted to thank this very healthy discussion and very healthy attendance of October's webinar. I also want to thank both Jeff Feeney and Belinda Beard for putting all the different moving parts together for this webinar. And again, of course, I can't thank you enough, Gary Bruner and Jordan Burnstead, for presenting to us today, and of course David Hood for organizing this whole collaboration from the first get-go. So anyway, thanks again for attending today's webinar, and we look forward to our next one. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us. I did get a question here at the end, if we can share the slides. Gary, Jordan, is that okay?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, let Jordan send you the latest version of that, if you don't mind, Tony.
Okay, sounds good. And we'll be sharing that. And hopefully I'll try to find the best way to share a link to the recorded video so that our attendees can, or our members can still kind of see that. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll look forward to our next webinar.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.